Lesson 7-1. We're going to start out with some mental math. So the first problem, 3/10 plus 3/10 equals how many tenths? You can pause the video at this point to answer the question. So when we add fractions, we have to make sure the denominators are the same. Since the denominators already match, all we have to do is add the numerators. So 3/10 plus 3/10 is equal to 6/10. The second one, sorry. The second problem, 8/10 plus 1/10 equals how many tenths? So again, we would add the numerators. 8/10 plus one more tenth would be 9/10. Going on to level 2. 5/10 plus 34/100ths. Be careful with this one because look, the denominators do not match. So in this problem, we have to make sure that the denominators do match before we can add. So since this one is tenths and this one is hundredths, I can make an equivalent fraction that is equal to hundredths. So to change tenths to hundredths, I would multiply the numerator and the denominator times 10. So 5 times 10 would be 50 hundredths, and 5 times 10 would be 50, and 10 times 10 would be hundredths. So it would be 50 hundredths instead of 5/10. And then I could add my numerators, 50 plus 34, and I would get 84. Okay, the next problem. Nine-tenths plus 2/100ths. So again, in this problem, we have tenths and hundredths. So we can't add them the way they are. We have to change it so that the denominators match. So we would have to multiply the 9 times 10 and the 10 times 10 to turn this into hundredths. So 9 times 10 would be 90, and 10 times 10 would be 100. So we would have 90 hundredths plus 2 hundredths, which would equal 92 hundredths. Okay, our math message for today says, how can the picture above help you remember how many cups are in a pint, how many pints are in a quart, and how many quarts are in a gallon? So you can pause the recording at this point and see if you can figure out what goes in these 4 blanks. So if you look at the drawing, this is a big G, goes all the way around the outside. And then we have 4 Q's in the inside. Each Q is filled with 2 P's, and then each P is filled with 2 C's. Okay, so the G stands for gallons, the Q stands for quarts, the P stands for pints, and the C stands for cups. So if it says 1 pint is equal to how many cups? So I have to go find the P for pint and how many C's are inside. Well, there are 2 inside. The quart, how many pints is in 1 quart? So I'd have to find the 1 Q and find out how many pints, how many P's are inside of that Q, and there are 2. A half gallon is equal to how many quarts? So for this one, you have to think just half of it, okay? Not the whole gallon, but just half the gallon. So in half the gallon, how many quarts are there? Well, there's 1, 2 Q's, so there's 2 quarts and a half a gallon. And then how many how many quarts in a whole gallon. So then you'd look to see how many Qs are in the whole thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've talked about lots of different ways that you can measure. We've talked about how to measure weight and how to measure volume. The other thing that we've used to measure liquids would have been milliliters and liters. This is just another way. These are the U.S. customary units. Liters and milliliters are used in some other countries, but in the United States, typically we use these to measure liquids. So a handy diagram like this is a good way to help you remember how many quarts are in a gallon, how many pints are in a cup, or how many cups are in a pint. This is handy in cooking. It's also handy in like if you are mixing up Miracle-Gro or something to put on your garden. It's something that you might use. Okay, we've used a lot of different conversion charts this year, and this is just an example of another conversion chart. This one changes gallons into quarts. This one changes quarts into pints. This one changes pints into cups. So if you look at the gallons on the top conversion chart, 1 gallon equals 4 quarts, 2 gallons equals 8 quarts, 3 gallons equals 12 quarts, 4 gallons equals 16 quarts, and 5 gallons equals 20 quarts. So what are we doing to change gallons into quarts? Okay, so what we have to do is we take 1 times 4, 2 times 4, 3 times 4, 4 times 4, 5 times 4. So we take the number of gallons times 4 because there's 4 quarts in every gallon. So when you change gallons into quarts, you would multiply times 4. And we know that if you're going the opposite way, if we're changing quarts into gallons, instead of multiplying times 4, we would divide by 4. So 4 divided by 4 is 1, 8 divided by 4 is 2, 12 divided by 4 is 3, 16 divided by 4 is 4, and 20 divided by 4 is 5. To change quarts into pints, 1 quart equals 2 pints, 2 quarts equals 4 pints, 3 quarts equals 6 pints, 4 quarts equals 8 pints, and 5 quarts equals 10 pints. So what do we do to change quarts into pints? We multiply times 2. 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 2 is 6, 4 times 2 is 8, 5 times 2 is 10, because there are 2 pints in every quart. And if you wanted to change pints into quarts, instead of multiplying 2 times 2, you would divide by 2. So to change pints into cups, 1 pint is equal to 2 cups, 2 pints is equal to 4 cups, 3 pints is equal to 6 cups, 4 pints is equal to 8 cups, and 5 pints is equal to 10 cups. So to change pints into cups, you would multiply times 2 again, because there's 2 cups in every pint. 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 2 is 6, 4 times 2 is 8, and 5 times 2 is 10. Now, in your math journal, you have the charts that we filled in before. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the page that would be in your journal, and it would look like this. So you could either use the conversion chart, or you could use the gallon drawing, I guess you could call it, to figure out what goes in the blanks. So to change pints into cups, we would have to, there's 2 cups in every pint, so you would have to multiply times 2 to do all of these. And then again, remember, if you're going backwards, you're changing cups into pints. Since it doesn't take as many pints, instead of multiplying times 2, you would divide by 2 if you're going this direction. So take a second to fill out that chart, what goes in those blanks. So we would have 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 2 is 6. 5 times 2 is 10. And we could think about this one as either what number times 2 equals 16, or 16 divided by 2 equals what? And that would be 8. Okay, the second one, we have quarts into pints. So if we look at the quarts and the pints up here, we have 2 pints in every quart. So again, we would be multiplying times 2. So 1 quart is equal to 2 pints. 2 quarts is equal to 4 pints. 3 quarts is equal to 6 pints. For this one, we could think what number times 2 would give me 14, and that is 7. 9 times 2 is 18. And 13 times 2, that's a really bad 8, sorry. 13 times 2 is 26. All right, to change gallons into quarts, if you look up above, there are 4 quarts in every gallon. So we would have to take a gallon times 4 quart. So 1 times 4 would be 4. 2 times 4 would be 8. 3 times 4 would be 12. What number times 4 would give me 36? That would be 9. And 15 times 4, if we do 15 times 2, that's 30. And that's doubled, would be 60. So that's a shortcut you could use to figure that out. And then for the last chart, we're changing quarts into cups. So in a quart, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 cups. So for this one, again, we would have to multiply times 4. 1 times 4 is 4. 3 times 4 is 12. 5 times 4 is 20. 6 times 4 is 24. And what number times 4 would give me 40 would be 10. Okay, so we're going to do a few problems associated with this. So how many cups are there in a quart of milk? Okay, so we have quarts, and we can go back to our picture. Cups in a quart. Okay, so here's a quart, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 cups in a quart. And how many cups would be in a gallon? So again, if we go back to our picture, in a whole gallon, how many C's are in that whole thing? We have 2, 4, 16. Okay, in 2012, the city of Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, set a record for building the world's largest working fondue pot. The pot holds 275 gallons of melted cheese. How many pints is that? So if we want to change gallons into pints, we have to figure out how many pints are in each gallon. Okay, so if we go back to our picture again, how many pints are in a gallon? There are 8. So we would have to multiply times 8 to figure out how many sorry, wrong page. Sorry guys, too many pages here. Okay, we're just going to use this one and pull this down. So we'd have to take 275 times 8 to figure out how many pints would be in 275 gallons. So you could use your partial products multiplication, lattice, rectangular method to get that. Number 6, Mr. Lee ordered 45 pints of milk for the 4th grade party. There are 96 4th graders, and each is supposed to get 1 cup of milk. So to figure out, we need to know if there are enough cups of milk to feed 96 4th graders. So can they each have 1 cup of milk? So we need to know how many cups are in 45 pints. So we can look at this chart up here because it shows pints to cups. So there are 2 cups in every pint. So if we have 45 pints, we'd have to take 45 times 2 to figure out how many cups that is. So you can do that real quick. And 45 times 2 would be 90. If there are 96 4th graders, did he get the right amount of milk? And no, he did not get enough because he's going to be short about 6 cups. So it says how many pints of milk should he have ordered? So to get enough pints for 96 4th graders, he would have had to add 3 more pints to that. So he would need 48 pints. Daphne and Jordan made jam to sell at the market. Their jam is sold in pint-sized jars. They made 137 quarts, but only sold 59 quarts. How many pint-sized jars are left? Okay, so this is a 2-part problem. So think about how you would solve this. Okay, so if they're selling jam at the market, they're selling it in pint-sized jars, and they made 137 quarts and sold 59. So we want to know how much is left. So the first thing we have to do is do 137, take away the 59 that they sold. So, oops, I can't write over there. 137 minus 59. This might be tricky to do with this. Okay, so 7 ones minus 9 ones. I have to borrow from our tens. Okay, so we're going to take a 10 away, trade that for 10 ones, add it to the 7 ones we already have. So now we have 17 ones minus 9 ones is 8 ones. And we have 2 tens minus 5 tens. So we're going to have to borrow 100. We're going to trade that 100 for 10 tens, add them to the 2 that we already have. So now we have 12 tens. 12 tens minus 5 is 78. So we have 78 quarts left. But the question was, how many pint-sized jars are left, not how many quart-sized jars are left. So we have to change our quarts into pints. So if we want to change quarts into pints, we would have to multiply that times 2. So we would have to do 78 times 2. So figure that out. So 70 times 2 would be 140. 8 times 2 would be 16. So 140 plus 16 would be 156. And then the last problem, James had a 3-quart water bottle. Eileen bought a 1-gallon jug. Whose container holds more? Okay, so we have 3 quarts and 1 gallon. So let's go back and look at our chart. So one of them bought a gallon container, and one of them has 3 quarts. So which one is more? A gallon would be more because a gallon holds 4 quarts instead of 3 quarts. So Eileen has the larger container. And how many more cups does she have is what we want to know. So if she's got a whole gallon, then he had 3 quarts. So he had 1, 2, 3. So she's got 1 extra quart. And how many cups are in that quart? 1, 2, 3, 4. So our answer would be 4. Okay, so that is lesson 7-1. I will send out the homework that goes with this. So if you want to go ahead and do the homework that goes with it, you sure can. If you have any questions, give me an email or send me a message on Google Classroom and I will get back to you. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you later.